Welcome to the Game Before the Money podcast, an oral history of pro and college football. Hi everyone, this is Michael Jackson. Amazing stories coming your way from Green Bay Packers legend and Hall of Famer Jerry Kramer. This interview has been in the vault for a couple of years, and really excited to bring it to you over 2 episodes. This is the first episode, and there'll be a second episode I'll be releasing in a couple of weeks. Jerry Kramer played for Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers from 1958 through 1968. He mostly played guard, but he was also a kicker. His kicking played a huge part in the Packers' victory in the 1962 NFL championship game over the Giants. Jerry Kramer played his college football at Idaho, the state in which he grew up in and went to high school. You're going to hear some pretty incredible stories in this episode, including a couple of things that Jerry overcame in his early years. Like I said earlier, this interview was recorded a couple of years ago in 2022 for the radio show, The Game Before the Money. I had to edit the radio version down to about 10 minutes, and these 2 episodes are much more in depth, obviously, featuring stories I had never known before, and I'm guessing you may not have either. Remember to visit thegamebeforethemoney.com for great football history articles. Also remember that the Game Before the Money Oral History Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit. As I said before, this interview with Jerry Kramer will be divided into 2 podcast episodes. We start this episode with Jerry Kramer talking about his formative years and how he got started in football. So, you grew up in Idaho. How did you first get into sports?
I had an older brother named Russ, and he was a running back and pretty good player. And I used to go watch him practice, or once in a while get to go to his games. And he was about maybe 5 or 6 years older than I was. And so he was mainly responsible for getting me involved. And once I got involved, I had visions of being a fullback or maybe a wide receiver even, because in the 6th, 7th grade, I caught a couple of passes that made scores, and that was pretty exciting to me. So when I got to high school, I told the coach that I wanted to be a fullback. And he said, well, that's fine, Jerry, but we have plenty of fullbacks. And you'll probably sit on the bench if you're going to play fullback. But if you want to play guard or tackle, you'll probably start. And so I considered the possibility of starting and playing or sitting on the bench, and I went for playing. So that's where it began. And I had a line coach. It was an older fella, and I was a sophomore with big feet and big hands and stumble, fumble, and fall, and just a klutz. And he came up to me one day and took my hand and held it out and looked at it and said, son, you got big hands and you got big feet, but you're going to grow into them one of these days, and you're going to be a hell of a football player. And he took a couple steps away, and he turned around and looked back at me, and he said, you can if you will. And I said, if I will what? I can what? What are you talking about? What do you finish the sentence? What do you mean? And he just gave me a half a smile and walked away. but I became a lineman at that time.
Wow, and you had you proved that you had the will to do it then later on.
Yeah, once it got into the playing the games, and you were part of that, and your teammates, that whole relationship with other ball players on the team, and the fact that you were making a contribution to the team made you really feel good about yourself. And so I would much rather make a small contribution than sitting on a big bench. So I became a lineman, and it was I got to play defense a bit there initially, but when I went to the university, they said, you are a tackle. I got a scholarship, and I got to go to college. So that was a wonderful thing that football did for me.
Jerry Kramer also played basketball and track in high school. He was a state champion shot putter in track. Now, how he got into the shot put is an incredible story. In fact, it was the shot put that might have saved his NFL career.
Yeah, I played high school basketball, but I went out for track at the university, and I threw the shot put. There's a whole story there in itself that if you got plenty of time.
Oh yeah, I have as much time as you do, Jerry. That makes
well, I was a little. I was growing, and I was clumsy, and my feet were oversized, and my hands. And I snuck my grandfather's shotgun out of the closet and managed to get a buddy of mine together, and we got a box of shells and went duck hunting, and didn't tell the parents or grandpa or anybody else. I ended up shooting myself with a 10-gauge double-barrel shotgun. I had it in my hand, and I was flipping the moss off this big rock I was setting on, waiting for my buddy who borrowed a boat from some neighbors that he didn't know, and I didn't want to do that. So I was sitting on this big rock and rolling moss, and the piece stopped about 6 foot away, and I've been there a couple hours, and I'm half asleep and kind of dazed, and I grabbed the shotgun by the barrel and put the butt toward the moss and was going to flip the moss off the rock. And the shotgun had the old rabbit ear trigger stuck up, and you pulled them back and fired that way. And I had them pulled back, and all of a sudden the gun went off in my hand, and it blew half my arm off and went up my side. So I got both barrels and got to the hospital and got some transfusions, and was kind of touch and go for a while, but we spent about 10 days in the hospital, and the arm was pretty well mangled, and it was just shredded, actually, just like hanging down about a foot below my bone, and we had a mess, and never did really cure it or make it. It didn't really heal up? Well, it healed up, but my hand was in a kind of a claw, and I couldn't straighten the fingers out. And I was lucky to have the hand and the arm, because the doc came in and actually took a ink pen out of his vest pocket and drew a line just below the elbow. And I drew it on my arm. And I said, "No, doc, no." He said, "Jerry, any complications, any infections, any problems, anything at all, we'll have to take it right here." So, oh wow, I'm looking at losing my arm. And how old were you? And I was like 15. 15. Wow. I was like a sophomore in high school. Yeah. So I recovered from that, and I went out for track, and I was a shot putter and a discus thrower, and I wanted to be an athlete, and I wanted to compete at track, and I didn't want to be a cripple. I was, my hand wouldn't open, and I could put the shot put in it. I could throw it, but I couldn't use my fingers very much. So I worked awfully hard at it so that I wouldn't be thought of as a cripple. It just haunted me. And so when I was a senior, I qualified for the state track meet, and I had one of the longest throws in the state. And so I went to Boise for the state track meet, and I was the first guy to throw. And they had about 5 judges and several thousand people, 5, 6, 7,000 people. And my little hometown was about 2,000 people. So the major viewers were my mom and her sister, and they'd make up about half the crowd for the track meets. So we weren't real popular then, but I got to go to state, and I warmed up and got all ready to throw. And just as I was ready to step into the ring, the loudspeaker, which was about 30 feet away, went off, and now from Sandpoint, Idaho, Jerry Kramer. And I choked like a goat. I just absolutely choked. I stepped into the ring, and I'd been throwing 45-ish, somewhere in there. So I stepped into the ring and threw the shot, and it was so short, they couldn't measure it. They had 4 judges out there, and the conversation was, it was way up there. Well, I didn't see it. Well, there's a lot of indentations there, and I'm not sure which one was his. Well, it was way up there. So we do this for about 15 minutes, and the head judge says, well, we're going to have to give him another throw. It's not his fault. He didn't, we should have marked it. So I get angry now. I get mad at myself. I'm generating energy, but I'm really angry at myself for folding, And so I threw the shot again, and this time I had everything right, and I threw it 51-10. And I set a new state record that had been established 17 years before that. Something happened to me when I got angry, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand how anger would make you strong and fear would make you weak. So it was an incredibly important moment for me to understand that, because I generated a false anger with my football game for the rest of my life. I prepared for the Sunday afternoons by starting on Thursday night, and a little bit more Friday, and a little bit more Saturday. And I woke up mad Sunday morning, and I played with all that energy bound up in me, and it made a difference in my performance on the field. So that was one injury, and I later ran a couple of sticks through my groin, up my chasing a calf, and I don't want to go through all the injuries, but we had a pretty tough time for quite a while, and I broke some legs in Green Bay, and ribs, and concussions, and detached retinas, and lost an eye, and all kinds of wonderful experiences. But Coach Lombardi made all of that into a positive experience, and the championships and the Super Bowls were payment for hard work and sacrifice.
What a tremendous backstory to Jerry Kramer's Hall of Fame career. That gunshot wound, however, wasn't the only injury that Jerry Kramer overcame as an adolescent. Jerry shared about another injury he encountered shortly afterwards. Only this injury affected him years later, even while he was playing for the Packers.
Yeah, the next summer, about a year after I shot myself, we had a kind of a semi-little farm, 2 or 3 acres, and we took our cow that I milked over to a pasture about 3 blocks away, and we'd leave the cow there for the the day and bring her home at night, and milk her, and then milk her in the morning and take her back to the pasture. And we had a calf, and the calf got out of the pen, and my father was 6'5", German, and a bit of a disciplinarian. And I knew that if he came home and that calf was loose, my backside was going to get tanned again. So I'm not a cowboy. I can't rope the calf. So I'm trying to grab it by the tail and steer it back under the fence and into where it should be. And I'm reaching for it, and it steps on a 1x6, a board an inch thick and 6 inches wide. It stepped in the middle of it, and it splintered, and the sharp, flat end stayed against the ground, and the spear-shaped sharp end caught me just above the leg in the groin and came within an inch of coming out my back. So I hospitals again, and the operation in Spokane and all this hoop-de-doo. And I seemed to overcome that, and I did, and I played at the university and 2 or 3 years at Green Bay before something happened, and I broke the left leg and separated the bones in the ankle, is what I did. And I had to have a pin put in the ankle, a metal pin to pull the bones back together. But when I was in the hospital, I developed a bleeding wound. I went down to 179 pounds the year I had that problem. But when we were treating it, it wouldn't heal, the incision. So my doctor in Green Bay said, "Jerry, there's something wrong there. There's something, I got to go back in." And I didn't want any more operations. And I said, okay. And I didn't show. And he scheduled again, and okay. And I didn't show. And finally, he gave me a cussing and got to be one of my pals. And I trusted him. And so he went back in, and he found 2 more slivers that had been in there for 13 years. And they were maybe 2.5 inches long to 4 inches long and big around as a hefty pencil.
Wow.
And yeah. So, and I just seemed to get injured and do silly things like that quite often. And so then I broke a leg and separated the bones, and that was a comeback. And then I had the concussion and the lost eye, and that was a comeback. And then the colostomy, and that was a comeback. And I came back from all of those injuries and played at Green Bay for 11 years, and most of 11 years I lost a couple. I had one unique experience there with Don Chandler, who was our kicker, and he was my roommate. And we had a tradition when we hit the field of running 3 laps to kind of warm up, just kind of jogging. And when I was coming back from the colostomy and the slivers and all of the operations there, again, I went down to 179 pounds. And I got up to about 210, 215, and I told the coach I was ready to go to practice. And he said, "Well, we can't count on you, Jerry." And I said, "Well, I'm counting on it. I'm planning on being there." So he said, "Well, I'm going to put you with the defense." And I said, "Good. I always wanted to play defense anyway." So he put me with the defense, and I was running, starting my 3 laps one day, and my lungs seized up, and I couldn't breathe. I got about half a lap, and I'm just choking, and I can't breathe. And Don Chandler comes over and said, "What's up?" And I said, "Oh, having trouble breathing." He said, "How much did you run?" I said, "About a half a lap." He said, "I'll run the other 2.5 laps for you. I'm a kicker, and I don't have to do any of these things. So between the 2 of us, we'll get your calisthenics done." So he ran 2.5 laps, and he said, "Let's go over by the tower to do our calisthenics with the rest of the guys." And so team would do 50 setups, and I could do 4. They would do push-ups, and I could do 3. And Don sat beside me, And if we were doing 50 as a team and I could only do 4 or 5, then he would do the rest. He would do 45, and he didn't have to do anything because, again, he was a kicker. So 37 days later, I got my game back together. I finally got enough weight back on me and everything healed up, and Don pulled me through that knothole, and I got back in the game and got back in my position. I didn't get to start the first 3 or 4 games, but took over my job about the 4th or 5th game, and 64, 65. So Don Chandler saved my bacon, and he was already one of my pals, and we were in business together, so he made quite a commitment to get me back to my health, and did a wonderful job and was a wonderful teammate.
Kramer attended Sandpoint High School in Sandpoint, Idaho. According to Pro Football Reference, he's one of 3 players from that school to play in the NFL. Sandpoint is located in northern Idaho, about 60 miles from the Canadian border. Official documents from the 1950 U.S. Census list the population at 4,262, and that's from right about the time Jerry Kramer grew up. After high school, Kramer attended the University of Idaho. Here's how he wound up playing college football for the Idaho Vandals. You went to Idaho? Was that your only college option, or?
No, I had I was over a friend of mine, a classmate of mine, is a basketball player, and he was about 6'5", and he played like he was about 5'5". He was just great coordination and talent, and the University of Washington was chasing him, and they started chasing me, and they invited me over to Seattle to look at the university and the facilities and the team and the whole thing. And they took me out on the practice field and introduced me to the team, and took me to the publicity department and showed me what that looked like. And then they offered to send me fishing up into Alaska on the west coast there for a week, because school started a week later at Seattle than it did at the University of Idaho. So I was pretty impressed with myself and with the way they handled me. And I called my dad and said, "Dad, I'm going to stay for a week and go fishing, and it looks like I'm going to go to the University of Washington." And he said, "You're going to Idaho. Now get your backside home and forget about it. You're going to Idaho." Dad had a electric television appliance shop, a couple buildings, and he was getting a lot of pressure from some of the townspeople about where I was going to school. So I went home and went to the University of Idaho. In fact, one of my other classmates had gone to Idaho the year before, and he got hurt his back, and so he became a trainer. And he came up and said, "I need a ride down to the university, Jerry. Can I ride with you?" And I looked out at his car and I said, "What's wrong with your car?" "Well, I just like to ride with you." And I get down to the university and I find out that the coach had told him if he came back without me, not to come back. So I was wanted at the University of Idaho, and we had a little bit of a rough start there, but it was a wonderful school and a wonderful group, and a big part of my life at that time. It was something no one in my family had done, and so I was pretty blessed to be able to go, especially on the scholarship.
Jerry played for Idaho in the mid-1950s. In the same class as him was Wayne Walker, a future All-Pro for the Detroit Lions. Kramer also played college football with Jim Norton, who is still, today, the all-time career interceptions leader for the Tennessee Titans franchise. Those interceptions, of course, were made during the time that the team was known as the Houston Oilers. Jerry Kramer was picked in the 4th round of the 1958 NFL Draft. Dan Curry was the Packers' first-round draft choice that year. The Packers selected future Hall of Fame running back Jim Taylor in the 2nd round of the 1958 NFL Draft, and then picked future Hall of Fame linebacker Ray Nitschke in the 3rd round. That's 3 Hall of Famers. Taylor in round 2, Nitschke in round 3, and Kramer in round 4. What a great draft that was for the 1958 Packers. Jerry shared some great stories about his rookie year and about the coach the Packers hired in 1959, the incomparable Vince Lombardi. Who was your roommate when you came in?
Dan Curry, Michigan State linebacker. We slept down at the Northland Hotel for several days prior to moving to the dorm for, I guess, because we got there late from the college all-star game. They were run out of beds, but Dapper Dan, we called him. He was always dressed to a nice coat and tie and high socks and shine shoes, and he was a pretty careful about his dress. Well, so we called him Dapper Dan. But he snored like a mule. And I spent most of my nights in the bathtub, in the bathroom with the door shut so I could get some sleep. But that was quite an experience. This is a
58?
58 was my first season, and Lombardi came in 59. So 58, we were 110-1. Had the worst record in the history of the franchise.
Oh, wow.
And then the man from New York came to town, and it was a whole different world. He said there are trains and planes and buses leaving here every day, and some of you will be on them. The rest of you will be in shape. You will be in the best condition you've ever been in your life. There are only 3 things important to you: your God, your family, and the Green Bay Packers. And not necessarily in that order. So he chewed ass and took names and changed the attitude just a little bit there.
When did you kind of get the feeling that you were going to be one of the guys that was going to stay on? And was there anything in particular that you thought you did, or a moment where you're like, okay, well, I'm going to make this team?
Well, we had another kid there named Kenny Gray. And Kenny went to St. Louis and played for 12 years. And I believe he made All-Pro. And he was a good football player. So it was between Kenny and I was the kicker. And so my wife is still in Idaho, and I make the team, and they've traded Kenny, and I am getting in the phone booth and call my wife, and I'm very excited and loud and carrying on, and Hog Hanner and one of the other veterans, can't think who it was right now, but heard me in the phone booth, and one of Joe Scabelli maybe was a lineman that they traded to New York, and they traded 2 guards and cut Kenny. So I was raving at the mouth and having a wonderful time talking to my wife, and they were outside the phone booth listening to me. Jerry, let's go have a beer. And I thought it was a little odd that these veterans would invite me to a beer, but I certainly wasn't going to refuse. So we get over to where we're having a beer, and I order a glass of bourbon, I think. I've got a glass in my hand, but they're chewing my ass, telling me how their friends got cut and all about their friends. And I am still pretty pumped up because I made the team, but I am respectful of these two veterans who are chewing my ass and getting pretty. Hog Hanner and Jim Ringo were the two guys. And this goes on for 15, 20 minutes. And I've got my hand around the glass. And it was one of those pretty heavy glasses that's a little shorter than normal, but heavier than normal. And I'm starting to massage it with my hand. I'm kind of putting pressure on it and taking pressure off me. And all of a sudden, the glass shatters. I just crush it with my hand, and it just blows all over the bar. And Hog Hatter says, "Well, Jim, I think we've talked to Jerry about enough, don't you?" And so they got off my case at that point. Yeah,
it's a great story. Wow.
There's a Coach Lombardi chewed my ass royally one day. I jumped off sides, and then I'd missed a play and had a couple mistakes, and he came running across the practice field, got about 6 inches from my nose, and said, "Mister, the concentration period of a college student is 5 minutes, high school is 3 minutes, kindergarten is 30 seconds, and you don't have that? So where's that put you?" Well, it put me checking my shoe shine, head down, looking at my feet, thinking that I'm probably going to get cut. This was in early camp. And so the wide receivers are staying out to run some patterns, and the rest of the team is dismissed. So I'm up in the locker room in front of my locker looking at the carpet, head down, assuming that I'm going to be cut. Gave me an ass chewing like that right in front of everybody. And I'd been sitting there for 30 minutes checking the diagram in the rug, and head down, chin in my hand. And he comes in and sees me, and he stops by my locker and he slaps me on the back of the neck and messes up my hair and said, "Son, one of these days you're going to be the best guard in football." And walked on, but I just damn near exploded. It blew me up to the point where I was, I hoped that he was telling the truth, and I thought that he was, and so he just made a dramatic difference in our relationship and my life. I all of a sudden couldn't do enough. I couldn't work hard enough. I couldn't do enough setups. I just, he got me. He hooked me, and
you bought in then.
Yeah, he did. The Giants called him Mr. High-Low. And so he'd get you chewing your ass and get you down where you were about to leave and go call your mama. And then he'd pat you on the back and say something like he said to me. He did that to me one other time down in San Francisco. I'd made the last game of the season. I had made the All-Pro team, and Fuzzy had made the All-Pro team, and it was early 61, 62, 60, somewhere in there. And we're out to practice. We got the news that morning, and everybody's buzzing with who's made the All-Pro team. And he calls us our meeting in the field. He calls everybody up, and we gather, and he goes, "Best guards in the NFL, my ass. We got the worst guards in football. The worst." And he's got me so pissed off now. I don't know what to do. And so the team goes out on the field, and I go out, and Bart's calling the plays, of course, and he calls the play, and I walk slowly up to the line of scrimmage and bend over, but I don't put my hand down, and I don't run a step. When the play is called and the hut is called, I just stand up, and I turned around. I'm glaring at the coach. I'm just ready to kill him. Best guards in the NFL, my ass. I didn't vote for me. I got no control over the newspapers. What did I do? So I get back to the huddle. I just walk back where the huddle was, and he's about 30 feet away, walking back and forth, checking his shoes. And I got my arms crossed over my chest, standing in the huddle, and I'm going to bust his mouth. That's what I need to do. I got to hit him right in the face. And Bart comes back for another play, and I said, Fuzzy, I'm out. Get in there. I'm done. So I come out of the huddle, take myself out, and I walk over to the sidelines, and I'm standing there just boiling. And here he comes after about 15 minutes. He knows exactly where we are, and he knows what he's done, and he knows where I am. So here he comes, and I'm 50 yards from the huddle. So he comes over to where I am, and I see him coming, and I've got my hands crossed over my chest, and I'm really pissed. And so he comes up to me and pushes me and slaps me on the shoulder, and oh, I wasn't talking to you. What's the matter with you? You know better than that. I didn't mean you. And so he apologized in his way, right? And that was one of the really brilliant things about him, is that I don't think he ever let you go from a meeting or a practice after chewing your ass, that he didn't make amends before he let you go. Whatever it happened to be, he would go back and kind of reestablish the communication and, in his way, make up for what he had said. And so everything was clear. Everything was okay. And you would forgive him, and he'd tell you you were wonderful. And so you'd bust your ass, and you had that burn, that fire, that drive, that hunger. So he was a great psychologist.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Game Before the Money podcast. Jerry Kramer will delve into the Packers championship years on the next episode. Remember to visit thegamebeforethemoney.com for great articles about NFL legends sharing their stories. Also remember my new podcast called Unvarnished Football. That is with Upton Bell. Those episodes come out every Thursday on your favorite podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts, and also at unvarnishedfootball.com. Transcriptions of some episodes of the Game Before the Money podcast are available at thegamebeforethemoney.com and are powered by our transcription partner, Sonix. That's spelled Sonix. Visit sonix.ai to learn more about their automated transcription services. Thegamebeforethemoney.com and the Game Before the Money podcast are brought to you by the Game Before the Money Oral History Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. Under no circumstances is AI data mining, scraping, rewriting, modeling, and the like allowed from the material on the Game Before the Money website or from the Game Before the Money podcast.